Well, good morning and thank you so much for coming along today for what I believe is going to be a transformational day. Looking at the subject of relationships, I think I might have warned you in the joining instructions that we're going to be doing some work and some processes today. For those of you I haven't met before, I will be your director for the day. My name is Marilyn Devonish and I'm going to be taking you through the rest of this segment. In terms of what we've got planned for today, we're going to do a movie screening. I'll tell you what that film is shortly. I had to keep it a secret because the film isn't yet on general release in the UK, and so they've given me permission to show it, but I wasn't allowed to publicise what that was. We're also going to be looking at your relationship script and story, and I thought that would be a nice thing to do given that we're in this beautiful sort of environment, and also that this is going to be beaming out to Hollywood a bit later on, so I thought we'd go for the theme for that. Part of what we want to do today is look at your beliefs around relationships. What are the kind of judgments you hold? What are some of the possible limitations and things that hold you back? And really start to look at kind of shifting and changing those. There's also going to be a kind of a clairvoyant section. Some of you have already met Gina this morning. She's in the back sort of channeling away. And so you'll hear about that later on. We've got somebody coming in a bit later to do some heart math work. And then we're finishing off with really looking at what can you do to start creating the relationship that you choose free of some of your emotional baggage. We're also going to be doing a number of processes today. So I know some of you in the room have already maybe done some of the HUNA and Access. For some of you it will be new, so we'll look at that later on and I'll explain how it all works. We're going to be doing some what is called OTH, opening the heart work, to start moving some of those blocks and barriers that can sit around the heart. And we're also then going to be doing some energetic work and clearing as we go through the entire day. And again, we'll kind of talk about that in a few minutes. So lots of things we'll be doing. And this morning is really kind of setting you up for what we're going to be doing this afternoon. And it's giving you a chance to bring a few things up to the surface, get your neurology fired up such that when we come to do the clearing work and processes this afternoon, you've had a bit of a chance to kind of think about it and have those thoughts come to the surface. My intention for the day, with everything I do, I always have an intention. What's my intention? What's my purpose? What's the thing I want to kind of put across? And today is very much looking at those old patterns. It really is about identifying some of those unconscious blocks and barriers and stories and limitations and judgments that you might hold. And it's the whole thing about starting to shift and change those beliefs. And with regards to the theme of today, the Valentine's, it's very much about the heart and the heart energy. And the film you're going to see is one of the first I've seen where they've concentrated solely on the power of the heart. The fact that it resonates, the fact that the heart is pretty much the first organ to be functional in the human body, and that the energy of the heart emanates outside of the body. And one of the things that they have found is as we go through life, if you get hurt, if you get upset, eventually your heart energy can start to kind of close itself down. So it doesn't mean you're heartless, it just means that it kind of gets a little bit of a shield and a barrier around it, understandably so, to protect itself. And so what we want to do today is start shifting and opening some of those barriers such that you can have that kind of energy really starting to flow. So my intention is that we're really going to start shifting and changing some of this energy to get things moving and to get things flowing. And one of the things I really want to do is scramble and interrupt your patterns, because once you have done that, that can often be enough to start changing things. That can be enough, then you open up the cracks to allow kind of change and transformation to come in. So that's partly what it's about today, is kind of shaking things up a bit such that you can start allowing those kind of changes in. One of the things we're also doing today, particularly for the morning segment, is today I was invited to go out and speak in Hollywood, in LA. I couldn't go because I was here, and so we talked about live streaming the event. With technology, both my side and out in LA, we thought might be slightly risky. So what we're going to do, we're filming this, and so a segment of this then will be kind of edited overnight, and they'll be playing this in America tomorrow. So hi Sheila Mack and everyone at your event. Fantastic to have been invited. Sorry I can't be there with you, but we'll share some of those things. And she is doing something about the forgotten heart, because Hollywood, as we know, is the center of the entertainment capital. But one of the things that Sheila Mack Mac is doing is talking about people who are on the periphery of Hollywood. In the same way we have homeless people in the streets of London, which is a very affluent city, they have exactly the same thing happening in Hollywood. So Sheila today is bringing together a number of artists and performers, and they're going to be going and giving out blankets and all sorts of things, as well as talking about the heart energy and bringing some of that resonance back. So we'll be beaming that out later on tonight. A little bit about me for those of you who I haven't kind of met and seen before. I had a very traditional background. I did a business studies degree, I did a postgraduate marketing diploma, graduated all pretty much top of my class. I think I was 1.8% off getting a first class degree. I don't say that to be impressive because I didn't have the confidence to go for a graduate job, even with those qualifications. And so I spent the next 5 years after that working as a secretary. And there's nothing wrong with being a secretary, it's just that I didn't have the confidence to do anything else. Eventually I decided I should get a proper job because that would give me confidence and gravitas. So I decided I would become an accountant. That coincided with a period of ill health, and it also coincided with my partner, and who was then at that time my fiance, having an affair and meeting someone else, and so my whole world came crashing down around my ears. And it was because of that, not knowing what I wanted to do with my work and career, having my partner go off and meet someone else, and at the same time the place I was living, he then decided he wanted me out in a couple of weeks. It was complete chaos, and I ended up in desperation going to something called an NLP training, because they had said that NLP is very good for communication skills and allowing you to at least talk to people and be able to look them in the eye when you speak. And that's the only reason I went along. But I went in one end really angry and really upset because I discovered about my partner's affair in the September. The NLP training was in the October. I actually tried to get out of the training because when I got the joining instructions, I realised that not only was it NLP, they were doing some stuff called hypnosis, timeline therapy, and HUNA. Now, I had a business studies degree and a postgraduate marketing degree, and I was studying to be an accountant. This was really not anything. So I tried actually to phone them up, and I said, look, I'm also very ill. I'm sleeping 12 to 15 hours a day. I've seen that it's a 12-hour day. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. And I knew that emotionally I was completely unstable. I think the only thing holding me together was my clothes because it was like, it was raw. Everything was raw. And they refused to give me a refund. They did what I now know to be a classic reframe. Thank God. But I went there like with a face like thunder for the first few days, thinking it was all nonsense. And at that stage, I couldn't even say my partner's name without crying, to the point my sisters had got into this thing where they would then go, they wouldn't mention him. They would try to kind of skirt around the subject, but if his name came up, I'd be gone. Went in on day one, angry and upset and all the rest of it. Day 7, I was absolutely fine. And actually on day 4, I was on the phone to my ex-partner, coaching and counselling him, helping him feel better. I'm like, this is bonkers. And that for me was the start of like, wow, this is amazing stuff. Because prior to that, my partner had had an affair 2 years previous, and I'd had 2 years of stress and angst and upset. We went to Relate, we did this, we did that. I was reading, Men Are From Mars, Women Are, you name it, I did everything, and nothing changed in that 2 years. And then suddenly, in the period of 7 days, I was sorted. And I thought, you know what? I know I've been doing the ACCA now for 2 years, but I went home and I said, look, I'm giving up the accountancy to become a hypnotherapist. And that is pretty much where it started. They thought I was completely bonkers, as have you been inducted into some kind of cult? But that was in October 2000, and that's what I've been doing ever since, because it was so profound. And it was then one of the things that I started off doing back in the year 2000, 2001, working with people around relationships, helping them to overcome the heartbreak and everything that goes with that. And over the years, it's transitioned into 1,000,001 modalities. I went from the NLP, did things like EFT and DNA theta healing, soul plan reading, future life progression, past life, you name it, I've probably done it, and I'm a trainer in it, or at least a practitioner, because it opened up a whole new world for me, and it was absolutely amazing. But it all started with the relationship thing. If it had not been for that heartbreak, I can pretty much guarantee I would have gone into the NLP like I used to go into most things. So I was a little bit of a cow and I knew best. And so I think I would have sat in that room and it just would have gone over my head. But I was so desperate and so broken that it was like, just give me what you got. So when I say to people, I'm really grateful for my partner having an affair, it almost doesn't compute in their brain, but I know it was that situation that put me into rock bottom. You know, I'd done this, thought about suicide, I ran the Samaritans, all that sort of stuff because of that situation. So when I say I'm really grateful for that, I totally mean it. But it all started there. That then transitioned into writing about my little foibles and heartbreaks and all the rest of it. And it just started one day. I'm in a store reading a magazine called Here's Health. A friend of mine called Faye says, we sometimes get a lovely lady comes in here and tries out the therapies. Why don't you ring her? And she gave me the number of somebody who's actually in this room. Yeah. And I won't publicly out her, but she can out herself if she likes. There she goes. And she gave me Lisa's number. And I just one day randomly phoned expecting an answer machine, and Lisa answered. And I'm babbling on, I am an NLP trainer and I do hypnosis. And in the end, I just found myself saying, look, you know what, why don't you just come down and try it out. If you like it, great. If you don't, great. Lisa came down, we did some work together. She then gave my name to somebody else who was writing an article. They phoned me up for a quote, and everything else kind of went from there. And so over the past, 12, 13 years now, writing for kind of newspapers, magazines, articles, and that sort of thing. And I love that because you have to take a massive subject and condense it down into 500 words and still kind of make a good point. So it's been amazing. And it all again started with the whole relationship piece, me getting into doing this work, and that then kind of transitioned into so many other things. And I know I've sent you random text messages over the years going, Lisa, I just wanted to say thank you. You're like, what for? But I just want to say thank you again, because that opened up a whole other avenue that I never would have thought possible. But it started first off with that whole thing with my partner, and for that I'm truly grateful. And for me, anything to do with the mind, transforming the mind, changing the mind. The very first book I was invited to co-author was with people like Tony Robbins, Wayne Dyer, Paul Shealy, who created photo reading, and Marie Diamond, who starred in The Secret. And ironically, the first time I hired this cinema was in 2007 when The Secret came out, because it was such an amazing movie. I just wanted to kind of show it to people, so I hired it, invited people to come down and watch it with me. But it's always for me been about the mind and been about transformation. And one of the things I didn't realise, I didn't consciously realise what I was doing, but when I first started, I realised that this work was a bit of a catalyst. Like, you do something with someone, even just having one of those 5-minute, what I call transformational conversations, and you'd run into them a few years later and they'd go, oh, you know that thing you did? Well, you know that thing you said? And then they just describe this whole chain of events. I'm like, man, this is so cool. And it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago that I was talking to one of my clients who was a lawyer, hardcore lawyer. I mean, she even looked a bit masculine. She was like total, what you would expect. Met her a couple of years later, and she was now an NLP trainer, working with lawyers. And I was like, what happened? Because we didn't talk about her even studying NLP. And she said, well, that session you did with me, that breakthrough session, it changed everything. And I started looking at it, and I realised that the work is like a ripple effect. But that ripple has been my logo since February 2001. And at this point we stand here, it's 2015. So at the time I picked it, I don't even know, it just popped into my head. But that's what this work has been like. And so I'm not necessarily expecting that everybody's going to have a lightning bolt today. But what I absolutely know of the last 15 years is that things will begin to ripple and change. And sometimes you don't even notice because it's quite subtle, but you'll get to a point where you look back and go, oh my God, this is so cool. How did I get here? And so I just say be open to that. And with all of the clients that I work with, there's normally one that kind of stands out. You know, there's like a flagship one that always pops into your head. And I know with the thing around money, there's one client who'd been struggling, I think, for about 7 years at that point. We did a breakthrough session, and the following month he made 100K in that month. And that's the first time in his entire life he's ever done that. So that was kind of my flagship for that. There's another client, when I met her, she could barely carry a little handbag. 4 weeks later, she's got a briefcase and a work bag, and she's like strutting through town. And it's like, okay, so that one sticks in my mind. When we talk about the speaking it into existence, Amana, who's in the back of the room, that's the flagship, where randomly on the Mind, Body, Spirit event in December, we talk about her randomly going to Saudi. 6 months later, she's gone and had been working in Saudi for what, 2 years, 3? 2?
2 years.
3 years. So there's always a flagship, and with relationships, there's a lovely guy called Keith who came to my Mind, Body, Spirit event in the December, had all the years I've known him, struggled with relationships and also wanted to look at working with his finances. So he did a 3-month coaching program working on both of those things simultaneously, because I realised pretty quickly that money and finances are often related to relationships. And so we did some work around that. This was taken at a thing called the London Yes Group, where I'm the speaker chair. And Keith comes up to me, he's beaming, he says, oh, there's somebody I've got to introduce you to. I'm like, okay. And he says, Marilyn, this is my beautiful girlfriend, Rose. And that was probably taken about 2.5, 3 years ago. I did check his Facebook page a couple of weeks ago. They're still together. And for me, that's one of those flagship ones, because at that point, he had been struggling for years to meet someone. So that one always sticks in my mind. And also, when we started working on both of those areas, he started picking up money completely randomly. Went to a dinner once, they're doing a prize draw. £500, £1,000, £5,000, £10,000. We did some work around that in terms of his intention, what he wanted to get. They do the £500, somebody won that. £1,000, Keith won it. And he was like, thank you very much. And I asked for 10 grand. And then as they went through the evening, they did the draw, he won the 10 grand. As well. And so that's Keith with the check. And I really think there is a connection between these two things. So one of the things I'm going to ask you to just start thinking about this morning is, if you were to look at your relationships and you look at your relationship with money, and we, in the Money Breakthrough program, we did the money relationship exercise a couple of days ago. It is completely fascinating. It's just amazing when you sit down and do it well. But often when I take people through that exercise, when they look at their relationship with money and talk about the interaction between the two, often it parallels what actually does go on in their real relationships. So I would definitely say, outside of today, look at both of those relationships and just see, are there any parallels? Because when you start working on both of those, you find then you start to get a lot more flow with regards to how things move. So definitely kind of be aware of that one. So one of the ways I always like to start my workshops, and also for the people watching out in the States, is just starting to think about, what would you like to take away from this workshop? Of all the things you could be doing today, what's going to make this a valuable and worthwhile day for you, such that it's been good use of your time? And just start thinking about that. And also, how will you know when you've achieved your outcome? And for you, what would you like your ripple effect to be? Such that when I run into you in 6 months' time, or a year's time, 1.5 years, 2 years, whatever it is, you can go, oh, Marilyn, and what is the thing you're going to say? Or who is it you're going to introduce me to? So just take a couple of minutes just to think about your intention for today. What do you want to take? What do you want to learn? What's your outcome? How will you know you've achieved it? And just spend a couple of minutes just having a little think about that, and what would you like your ripple effect to be? So, a couple of things. This segment we're going to do this morning, for the people out in America, this is your segment, in terms of, you can take these questions away, you can ponder them, you can think about them, because you may not have time in the schedule right this minute, but these are things you can take away. And with you guys in the room, we're going to be coming back to all of this afternoon, after lunch and after the film, and actually doing some written exercises around these. But what I want to do now is to, how can we say, throw the pebble in the water to get the numerology woken up and start bringing this stuff to the surface. And today is partly about changing your perspective, because sometimes when you change the way you look at things, the thing you're looking at actually changes. So part of it is just maybe kind of doing that. The film we're going to be watching is called The Power of the Heart, and ironically it was created by the same kind of team that produced The Secret, which is the film I showed here all those years ago, starring people like Maya Angelou, Paulo Coelho, who kind of wrote The Alchemist, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, Deepak Chopra, I think most people have kind of seen him out and about. And it's really looking at the heart as a transformational organ. And when I watched the preview and the premiere a couple of weeks ago, I'm sat there and I'm thinking, oh man, that would be perfect for my workshop, because the heart, metaphorically speaking, is the symbol for Valentine's Day and love and romance and relationships. And it is a powerhouse in terms of how it affects the body and how it affects the people around you, because your heart energy will emanate out. So I thought it was going to be the perfect accompaniment for today. So that's the film we're going to be watching. In terms of kind of getting the ball rolling, I think most of you have given your permission to kind of have the clairvoyant reading. What I would also like to do is some remote huna while we are watching the film and having the discussions and doing other stuff. So just really show of hands, for people who are okay with me doing a bit of remote huna, just put your hand up so I can see. Oh, I think that's everyone. Okay, that's fine. She's like, I'll have 2 lots. And I will explain about huna later on, but suffice to say, I have clients in America and Australia, Scotland, all over the place. They've got no idea what I'm doing, but they will, when I see them or speak to them, go, what did you do on Wednesday? And I'll be like, why do you ask? You were doing huna, weren't you? And when I look at myself, I think, actually, yeah, I was at home that day. And sometimes a client will just pop into my head, and I'll do a bit of huna, and I'll just carry on making my dinner or whatever it is I'm doing, and they will feel it. And I've had some clients, one woman, she turns out, parks the car outside my house, walked up to the door, didn't even say hello. She went, you didn't do any huna last week, did you? And I went, no, actually, I was really busy. Why'd you ask? Well, I didn't feel anything. So my clients can feel stuff even when they've got no idea what I'm doing. And I always do now a huna segment on my photo reading workshops, because photo reading is pretty straightforward, quite frankly. 5 steps. Learn to read at 25,000 words per minute, but it's people's mindset and beliefs that get in the way. So we do a little segment of huna, and I've had people in that room with their eyes closed, the lights are off, and it's darker than it is now. I am standing behind them doing the, even if you do huna, you don't know what that is, and they will say to me, oh my God, I felt like there was fire, it was really hot, and that's because I did a fire symbol at their back, or I did something, the water energy at the top of their head, and they said, oh my God, it just felt like a waterfall. And I'm like, these are people that haven't even heard of huna. So it's really kind of crazy cool stuff. So what I'll do the quiet version, because in the middle of the film, me going, might be slightly distracting. But the quiet version is you just think the thought. And so we'll do some of that just to kind of shake things up once we've brought some stuff up. First thing we're going to think about, we do this as a written exercise later, so it's just for you to start to entertain the thought. And given that we're in a cinema, given that we're talking to Hollywood, I thought it would be a great exercise. If your love life were a movie, what kind of script would it be? Would it be high drama? Would it be a romantic comedy? One of my friends on Facebook said hers is like a documentary, and I didn't get it. She said, it's like watching paint dry. And I thought, oh bless. And somebody said last night it was a, what should you say, drama, documentary, comedy. So just be having a think. If it was a script, what would it be? And we're going to do a written exercise around this later. Also thinking about what you're currently in. If you were the script writer and you were the one who was kind of, shouting, cut, next, go, how would you end this current scene? What's the ending you would script for it, and how would you kind of bring it to a close? And then be thinking about what would your next act be? If it was all in your hands, if you could actually go, this is what I'm going to create for myself next, what would you write? What would your next scene be? What would you be kind of putting on this board? And then thinking about, when you go back to that first thought, who and what would you be without your script and without your story? And people often laugh and say, particularly if things aren't going well, but then they realise they're addicted to the drama. Or they like the angst of the unrequited love. They like the kind of the action and adventure of the fight and the passion and the energy. And when you say, well, who would you be without that? They realise it will be kind of dull or a little bit boring. Or the reason they pick these arguments where they're always fighting and there's always action and drama is because it allows them to feel something and feel alive. So sometimes it's not as straightforward as just going, oh yeah, I don't want that anymore, because there's some kind of secondary game that sits beneath that. So I'm just going to plant you with that thought. We will come back to that one later. So that's the first thing we're going to be looking at this afternoon. The next piece is the kind of what I call the archetypal journey. And again, it's very apt for where we are, because if you look at any of the really good, successful, amazing movies, they all follow the archetypal profile and the archetypal journey, where it starts with some kind of call. You are called to do something, to step up. But in order to do that, you've got to cross the threshold, and you've got to be brave, and you've got to then kind of think, okay, there might be something else out there. You've got to look at some possibilities. You've then got to kind of face some challenges which are going to require you to let go of your old stuff. If you manage to do that, you're going to reach the abyss. And there's a beautiful movie called The Abyss, when there's a scene where it's just this beautiful blue water as far as the eye can see. And that's what it kind of feels like in the abyss. And all of this stuff played out in my life big time, with the kind of deciding to change my career and also what was happening in my relationship. I was studying to be an accountant, but I felt there was something else that I wanted to do. And when I kind of started looking at the NLP, it was almost like it was calling me. But then I had to step over the threshold and go, all right, I'm going to go for it. As soon as you do that, bless you, you then kind of think, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? I'm going to have to let go of my identity of being able to say I'm an accountant, and it all gets a bit crazy. And also I had to let go of my identity of being somebody else's fiance, and everything I built up in my mind about how that was going to play out and what was going to kind of come of that. I then had to sit with that uncertainty, and quite frankly, many people will hear the call, cross the threshold, but when it gets to the challenge or the uncertainty, they will scramble back to the call. And many people spend their whole life hearing the call and not answering, or doing the cha-cha-cha, 1 step forward, 2 step back. It takes quite something to move yourself and stay with the uncertainty and move into the place of transformation. But this is a place where you then have to resolve your stuff and your issues. So for me to kind of go, all right, then I'm going to say no more. I cannot continue in this relationship. Oh, that was big, but I had to let go of some stuff. And for me to say I'm going to give up the accountancy, which I'd already put 2.5 years into, to move into this unknown thing, that was big. So some old issues had to be resolved there. If you make it that far, well done. You then start coming into the revelation where suddenly you go, So people started saying, you seem to have a knack for this coaching, this hypnotherapy, and you're like, okay. And then you start getting a sense of satisfaction. You can now start to see how the pieces fit together. And it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then you make your return to the kingdom, metaphorically with your gifts, the things that you bring out to the world. And so for me, the thing that I brought back to the kingdom was transformations, where I then said, wow, if I can be this stubborn, this upset, this angry, this suicidal, and within the space of a couple of days have completely turned that around, I want to now be able to go out into the world and do that with other people and show other people how they can change and transform and move themselves through that cycle. And again, relationships often follow that as well. And we'll kind of talk about that in a bit more detail later. And I went to a talk with the editor of Psychology's magazine a couple of days ago. And she was saying of all the work that she's done as editor, and she sees a lot of stuff, she said one of the things she was most excited about was the hero's journey, the archetypal journey. And she specifically mentioned Star Wars. And the slide I had just finished before I left home to go to London to see that talk was this very slide. And the first picture I put on it was Star Wars. Because, you know, you've got Luke Skywalker has to learn to use the Force. He's got to go through that whole thing. You've got Neo in the Matrix. His call was actually a knock on the door to say, oi, you know, we need you. Right back down to things like Dorothy and the red shoes. She finds herself in this strange land. She has to then start moving forward. She comes up with challenges. She has a sense of uncertainty. But again, she builds her little team and they all kind of return and save the kingdom. And then you've got things like Pretty Woman, where again, it's exactly the same story. Julia Roberts is doing something she doesn't want to do. She feels a sense of discomfort around it. And that actual story finishes with the quintessential knight on a white horse. Actually, he was in the back of a limousine, but it was the same sort of premise. And so one of the things I'm going to be asking you to think about is, even when you grew up, fairy tales, stories, all that kind of stuff, what were the fairy tales and stories that played in your mind? Because some of these things inform what you feel and think and believe about relationships. Is it happy ever after? Or does your prince never return, or whatever it is? So again, just be kind of thinking about that, because we're going to do a little exercise later with the archetypes and see how some of the stories and genres and things that you find yourself interested in, have they informed, albeit sometimes unconsciously, what you believe about relationships. Also, we're going to do a little guided process later for your relationship blueprint. And this is the thing in terms of because sometimes people just say, it's almost like they can't help themselves. They just find the same things playing out over and over and over again, despite and in spite of themselves and their best efforts. So one of the things I'm going to ask you is, what do you believe? Is there something you think, oh my God, it's almost in my DNA. It's almost just the way I am. And we're going to be exploring that a bit later. What patterns have you modelled? Sometimes you just model your immediate family, but sometimes not. The partner that had an affair when he was my partner and fiance, his grandparents and parents had all kind of followed the same pattern, but he was actually quite adamant because he'd seen the destruction and devastation of that he would never do that to someone. But it's exactly the thing that he did. So almost as though it was kind of in the genes. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, so is it your immediate family? Or did you maybe get those ideas from what you've been seeing on the screen, what you've been reading, or the people around you? And again, it's just starting to think about that, because later on we're going to do a process where we go back and start playing with rewriting some of that, and doing a little process where you go back and look at those scripts and blueprints and rewrite them in your mind. And then with regards to that, because there'll be things that are working for you, keep those, but is there anything you would want to change? What would those things be? And again, you can just be kind of having those in the back of your mind. We're going to do an exercise around those later. For the people out in the States, we will not be doing an exercise around that later. However, you can take those same questions, and you might want to, I say it's really nice to write things down, and it's also sometimes really nice to dialogue those things as well. You're almost saying them out loud, because sometimes you hear yourself say something going, where did that come from? So however you choose to do it, for those of you who are watching either out in Hollywood or who are watching the recording of this later. So we're going to have a look at that. We're also going to do what I call my Steve Jobs join the dots exercise, where we look in more detail about what are some of the things that have led you to where you are. And Steve Jobs famously said, you can't join the dots going forwards. And that I can't see in the moment I'm standing here what this will lead to. But I can go over here. Sorry, you see that. And now I can look back later on and go, well, if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have done that, and I wouldn't have done that, and blah, 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 blah. But you can't actually do it from the place that you're in, right in that moment. And so we're going to do a little exercise where you actually start tracing back possibly some of your worst moments, and just see what those led to. And often it doesn't necessarily lead to a situation, but it leads to an opening up or a closing down of something, or it leads to a strengthening of character, or showing you that you had resources inside that you didn't even know you had. And so we're going to be kind of exploring that and looking at the lessons and achievements. And one of the things that he says in his quote is there is no reason not to follow your heart. Because he's talking about living and dying and saying we're all going to eventually go the same way. So while you're here, follow your heart. But if your heart is closed, or if you've had to kind of close it off to protect it, it's very then challenging to follow that. And that's again partly what we're talking about today. And the event that's happening out in the States at the moment is very much about people giving from the heart and going out and saying, look, I'm in a place, it might be brilliant, it might just be okay, but I'm now going to go out and do something for someone else. And there have been, I love Facebook. Those of you who follow me know how much I love Facebook. But one of the things I really love about it, you get to see these amazing stories. And there was one recently of a homeless man who was given some money, and then they had a hidden camera and they watched what he did with that money, and they thought he's going to go and buy booze with it. Oh no, he went and bought a load of food and started giving it out to the other homeless people. That is so amazing, because you're giving from that place and creating that ripple outwards. And in order to be able to do that more fully, you've got to be able to embody that place and that space. And that's really what we're talking about here today. And that's the event that kind of Hollywood's Forgotten Heart is all about as well. So we want to kind of really open up that space. This exercise, this is one I'm going to ask you to play with during the film. And this is one that anyone watching the recording can take away and start using straight away. And it's something called OTH, Opening the Heart, created by a guy called Paul Wong. It's so deceptively simple, it almost seems a little bit, really? Is that it? And when I've done OTH sessions with my clients, they're starting off like, a bit like, they don't quite giggle as much as when we do access consciousness. You'll see why later if you haven't done it. But it's still a bit like, really, Marilyn? It's simple. You think about something that is troubling you, that you're upset about, that you're angry about, that you're stressed about, that doesn't sit right with you. And basically all you say is, I feel blah. And you say it 2 or 3 times. So you might just say, I feel angry, I feel angry, I feel angry. And then the next segment is you're saying, it's okay that I feel angry. It's okay that I feel angry. It's okay that I feel angry. And then you go to the opposite of that. What's the opposite for you of anger? And you might say, well, okay, I feel joy, I feel joy, I feel joy. And it's okay that I feel joy. It's okay that I feel joy. It's okay that I feel joy. one of the things you're doing with those statements, the bit I ask my clients to imagine, and just in case you haven't got a brilliant imagination or it hasn't woken up yet because it's quite early, you know, if you had a hot stove, and I've just put a little ring there so you don't have to visualise it, you can see it on the screen, but if you have an electric ring, if you have water and you throw the water onto it, it dissipates. What you do with the statements here is you take those statements, you imagine dropping them into the heart energy, and it has the same effect. It starts to dissipate those statements. And the reason I always get my clients to work on the positive and the negative is quite often in the personal development world, and quite rightly, you work on getting rid of the negative, get rid of the negative, get rid of the negative, rid of the negative. So a lot of energy goes into that. But a bit like the yin and the yang, we've got night and day, spring and summer, autumn, winter. It's balance. So if you put so much energy into that, what can unconsciously and inadvertently happen is you can almost start stacking up a little bit of an away from. And then this other side gets a bit neglected, but then as soon as you start thinking about the other side, your fear of not having the negative stuff comes back. It just creates all kind of crazy little things. And so what I've been saying to people is get neutral. Take almost like polarities, be okay with the good and the bad, the right and the wrong, the positive and the negative, and take yourself back to a place of neutrality. So it just is. And then from there, you can build up and move forwards from there. But if you are out of balance, that's where it doesn't take much to get you off kilter, and it doesn't take much to bring up all the old feelings. So say, well, rather than just trying to mask or run away from or hide the old feelings, just get them into that place, into that space of neutrality. And that's the place you want to be. So as you're watching the film that we're going to see in a few minutes, what I want you to do, and I will warn you now, there's one particular story in the film which is actually a little bit harrowing. I'm not going to say too much. I'm just going to say it's the one where they're hiding in the bathroom behind the wardrobe. I'll leave it at that. You'll know it when you see it. But that scene, it can evoke all sorts of emotions. If you notice something coming up, of course, just kind of be with that. You're human. And then play with the OTH and go, man, I feel devastated. I feel devastated. I feel devastated. It's okay. I feel devastated. And just play with the statement. Play with the statement. Play with the statement.
That's a question.
Yeah.
The insert, the positive one, is it almost like a made-up thing? Because if you're feeling negative, it's hard to then switch.
Yeah, you just think it's like a coin. Yeah, if you had a coin, what's the? Because you can ask 20 people what's the opposite of love.
Yeah.
You probably get 25 different answers. So you would think about, if you were flipping it, what's the opposite for you?
Okay.
And put that into the mix, just so you don't kind of get into that thing of all that energy goes into that. So yeah, it's kind of a made-up one, and often it will pop into your head almost simultaneously. But you don't have to say it out loud. You should say it silently in your head. But the key thing I found is I just imagine dropping those statements into the heart space, and it dissipates them, because it almost has this kind of expansive, transformational ability to do that. And it is a bit like that ripple effect. There are times, I swear, this is the absolute truth. There's one client, lovely lady, when I met her, she was petrified of public speaking. She had something called a TED talk coming up, which she was really scared of doing, had sort of been asked to maybe do some media stuff, didn't want to do it. And so we did some coaching work around that. She blew the TED talk out of the water. A couple of days later, she's on Sky News. The video clip of her on Sky News is on my website. Go and have a look. She is a woman who now loves public. She travels the world. I lost track of the number of countries she went to last year. Not only is she out there pitching and presenting and speaking, she's winning awards and money. She's the one who comes home with the big checks. This is a woman who hated it, and had been petrified her whole life. And when she did that TED talk, I said to her, I want you to pick an intention for the talk. I want you to pick a word that you want to transmute to the audience. And she picked the word. Now I said, the word is never going to be spoken by you. It will not appear on your slides. You just hold the energy of that. At the end of that TED talk, people were coming up to her and saying, oh, Erica, I think the word she picked was inspirational. That was inspirational. Wow. She then goes on to Twitter. Erica, I saw your talk, it was inspirational. Then on Facebook, people hadn't seen that talk. Erica, you are such an inspiration. At this point, she's like, Marilyn, what's going on? And I said, it's the intention thing. Yeah. You hold the intention, and that ripples out. And I do it with all my trainings. I have an intention, something. Those of you in the Magic program, we have a word of the week. It's a bit like that, where you put the intention out. And so what today is also about is holding the intention, what do you want to put out into the world? So for the people who are out in Hollywood today and tomorrow, their intention is to give something back to those forgotten hearts. So even if they haven't got much to give, or if they've run out of stuff to give, and you just sit with someone and have a conversation, that can be amazing. I was walking home one night, it must have been about 11:30. There was a guy sitting in the subway. We've got a little walkway in Watford that connects the Met Line to the centre of town. I don't know why. I saw him right from the top, and I had already decided I was going to give him some money. Don't ask me why. So I get up to him, take the change out of my pocket, and I give him some money. I go to walk away. And he said, thank you. I said, oh, no problem. No, what he said to me was, he said, I wasn't here for money. And I said, it's okay, fine. I said, I've got some change, take it anyway. And he said, it's really rare to be seen. And I said, well, you sat right there in the middle of the walkway, it's a bit hard to miss you. And he went, no. And of course I knew what he meant. But he said, so many people walk past me, they don't see me. And I stayed and I chatted to that guy for about 20 minutes. Oh, actually, I never rang him, he gave me his number. But we chatted for about 20 minutes. And just, what are you doing here, da da da. And he just said, oh, thank you. He said, I just feel amazing, thank you so much. I gave him like £4 in change. It wasn't about that, because I maybe did, if I even hadn't given him any money, if I'd stopped and even said hello, or just had that little conversation, that was the thing that rippled out. And so I would invite you beyond today to have a real sense of what is it you want to put out into the world, what are the vibes you want to send out, because trust me, people will pick up on those vibes, just as every one of you do. You will know when somebody's messing with you. You know when somebody's giving you a little bit of BS. You will know when somebody's genuinely coming from the heart. And I would say the minute you start to put yourself in that space and that place and that energy, everything then starts to change, and everything then becomes much more amazing and much more magical. So that is the kind of invitation that I would extend to you. But play with this one while watching the movie, just kind of saying, what, and even if you just do the top bit, what you feel, and it's okay, because it moves you out of the energy of being wrong. And if you kind of just share that with people, it can be a game changer, where they're not always down on themselves or their partners, because often when you're in a relationship, your partner gets the brunt of your stuff and gets your crap, because they're like your dumping ground, and this is a really great one to be able to do that. So what we're going to do is just have a quick little break. Now, before we go to a break, are there any questions or any queries about anything we have touched on or alluded to this morning?